In our series, Rebuilding America, we show how people and communities are working together to build a better world. Ahead of Earth Day tomorrow, we're introducing you to conservationists studying a striking indicator of climate change. This morning, we're learning about ghost forests, acres and acres of forest land drowning from rising sea levels. Nancy Chen recently took a trip inside a ghost forest.
As the sun rises over Maryland's Chesapeake Bay, a new chapter of the climate change story is unfolding.
So this is the start of a ghost forest?
That's right. This is the early beginnings of a ghost forest. This forest is effectively dead already. The trees just don't know it yet.
Scientists like Matthew Kerwin say ghost forests are the haunting result of rising sea levels. Since the late 19th century, at least 100,000 acres of forest here have transformed into a growing cemetery of trees.
What creates a ghost forest? How is a ghost forest formed?
Sea level rise and coastal flooding bring in salt. It accumulates in the soil, eventually builds up to levels that the trees can't survive. At that point, the trees start dying, and eventually there's no new trees to replace them. And so when they die, the only thing that's left is the marsh around it.
How quickly does this happen?
It can be slow if you're looking at it from year to year, but then a couple years goes by and you realize that whole stand of trees is no longer there.
The dying trees represent a personal loss for Kerwin, whose family has lived along Maryland's eastern shore for 10 generations. They've seen communities disappear as land is lost.
It must be emotional to see all of this.
It is, and as a scientist, I think the sense of inevitability is a little stronger for me. You know, everybody thinks of sea level rise in terms of flooded city streets and subways and catastrophic hurricanes like Katrina. But really, the impacts of sea level rise in most places are far more subtle.
Subtle steps that eventually lead to this.
This effectively is the final stage of the ghost forest. Where we are now, this was forest land maybe 70 years ago. And now if you look around, it's a real marsh.
It's a problem coastlines are facing across the country, but nowhere as dramatically as the hot spot between North Carolina and Massachusetts. That's where sea level is rising 3 times faster than global rates.
The Chesapeake Bay is especially vulnerable to ghost forests because of how flat this land is. The forest here is retreating at a rate of 15 feet a year, and that's accelerating.
The ghost forests are the most striking indicator of climate change we have anywhere on the East Coast. We're used to seeing pictures of glaciers that have melted and retreated back miles. Well, it's the same thing here. We have the remains of trees that mark where dry usable land was just a couple generations ago.
Is there anything anyone can do to bring it back?
That's something I struggle with. I'm supposed to try to think of solutions for these problems, and you know, I can't come up with any solutions for saving hundreds of thousands of acres of forest. And so where I come down is to try to ensure that if we're going to lose all that forest, that we at least get something in return, and that's the marshes.
Through fieldwork, Kerwin and a team of researchers are salvaging what's left behind and nurturing the marshes they've become.
We all benefit from marshes. Marshes are just famous, ecologically important ecosystems. They rival the tropical rainforests. They sequester carbon, they improve water quality, and so the loss of the trees is inevitable, but whether we get marshes to take their place and what kind of marshes, that's not inevitable.
Farther north, a similar mission is underway to address the rapid rise of ghost forests in New Jersey.
We knew this was a problem for a while, but it really became visible in recent years where it's coming up against places where people live and they can see it.
Is this considered a Band-Aid? Is this a solution?
Well, this is a partial solution.
Forester Bill Zipsey supervises a tree restoration site the state of New Jersey built a decade ago. The goal is to reforest 10,000 acres of Atlantic white cedar trees, destroyed by Superstorm Sandy and saltwater intrusion. Zipsey's team is planting new trees miles inland, where they're less likely to become ghost forests.
With the climate literally changing around us, adaptation is the key. You know, so we may not get the forest back exactly the way it was, or exactly where it was, but we can keep that resource alive on the landscape.
'Cause 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 'c
its effects reverberate far beyond this forest.
Oh, absolutely. It plays a much larger role in the overall surrounding ecosystems. And I think that's important for people to remember. It's not a hopeless story. These forests can be restored, they can be saved, and you can adapt.
Researchers predict that over the next century, up to 18,000 square miles of dry land in the U.S., about the size of Maryland and Vermont combined, could be submerged in water. I mean, you talk about saving the forest for the trees, and it's haunting when you see the change that has happened in just one generation.
But there does seem to be some hope there, Nancy, at the end, where he says these forests can be saved. We need to pay attention to that, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's something that people should be aware of that's happening. A lot of folks who don't live near the water don't realize these communities are being lost, but they are trying to grow new forests and also nurture the marshes these forests have become.
As long as we still have solutions, we have hope to restore.
There you go.
Nancy, thank you. Great reporting.
Thank you.
Rebuilding America is sponsored by Steel. Find yours at steeldealers.com.
Make your first move with battery power made by Steel. Right now, save $50 on the FSA 57 battery trimmer. Real Steel. Find yours.